listening to a UC San Diego podcast.
Okay, I'm Professor Rauch, and let's see if this is working. Yeah. I'm Professor Rauch, and this is International Trade, Econ 101. I'm going to try to keep use of paper down to a minimum for the course. So everything for the course except the exams is going to be in the textbook, or occasionally if I produce some slides that are not directly out of the book, I'll post those on the class website. And I'll have even the syllabus on the class website. So you just go to TED and you can see that syllabus on the website today. The administrative aspects of the course are all right there in front of you. And this year, at least for the first midterm exam, I'm going to do an experiment, something I've never done before, which is have you take an open book exam. Okay, so we'll see how that works. I'm hoping that it's going to work well, and if it works well, maybe we'll continue that through for the second midterm and onward. Okay, so I'm not promising anything right now, except that the first midterm will be open book. Okay, I can't tell you about the rest of it. Okay, in terms of the content of the course, we're going to be starting off here, as you see, before the first midterm with models of trade. So models of trade is going to be the basics. That is, why do some countries export certain goods and import other goods? What's at stake in international trade? That is, why are the gains, what are the gains and losses from international trade? How does trade affect the domestic economy? As we get into the applications of these models to the domestic economy, if you see there, we have a discussion of foreign outsourcing. We'll start to talk about how, for example, trade affects the distribution of income in the domestic economy. One of the things that's become a big topic this election year is the growing level of inequality in the United States. And often people attribute that growing level of inequality to international trade. And there may be some very good reason to that. Back in the 1970s, for example, college graduates such as yourself earned about 50% more than high school graduates on average. Now they earn almost double what high school graduates make. Now, does that have anything to do with international trade? We'll try to understand that by the time we get to the section on foreign outsourcing. And more globally, we can ask about whether globalization and outsourcing inevitably increase inequality of incomes worldwide. We'll also be talking about international movement of labor. And here we have something that's of course, great importance to the United States, although interestingly, it's kind of faded into the background of the electoral discussions this year. Right now, there are maybe 1 million legal immigrants coming to the United States every year. And perhaps another 300,000 illegal. That was at least before the Great Recession cut down on the illegal immigration. What are the economic pluses and minuses for both the people already here and for the immigrants themselves? And do we need new immigration policies? That's some of the issues we'll address when we talk about international movement of labor. Then we're going to have second midterm, and then we'll talk about international movement of capital. So international movement of capital just means international borrowing and international lending. So that's also been something that's very much in the news these days. Mostly around the European Union and around the Greek default. That is, Greece has formally now defaulted on its debt, one of the first industrial countries, that is, rich countries, to have done that in a long, long time. And it stirred all sorts of fears about other defaults within the European Union, and then also a lot of rhetoric about whether the United States could somehow or someday find itself in the same position as Greece. We hear that in the political discourse quite a lot. So we'll try to get some insight into those issues when we talk about international movement of capital. Then we'll then move on to some somewhat more advanced issues in modeling international trade, talk about taking international trade down to the individual firm level rather than thinking about it as just an economy-wide outcome. And we'll discuss multinational corporations a bit. And then we'll get into trade policy, sort of the basics of trade policy, which are import tariffs and quotas, and then into more complicated trade policies surrounding international agreements, agreements pertaining to labor and the environment, for example. So this often, again, becomes a controversial issue. As many of you, I think, know, the United States is party to NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. We're also party to the WTO, the World Trade Organization. We can ask ourselves then, do we benefit from the reduced barriers to trade that are brought by these agreements? Do we have the ability, once we're in these agreements, to set our own standards for workplace safety or for environmental protection? And what are the implications of international agreements, for that matter, for the global environment? Does international trade cause dirty industries to move to less developed countries? If it does do that, is that good or bad? Okay, should the United States join a new international agreement on global warming? Because these are some of the things that we'll discuss at the very end of the course. All right, so that's a very quick topic overview for the course. What I want to do now is just throw some numbers at you to familiarize yourselves with the basic statistics of international trade, just how much trade there is, essentially, and who's doing it, what sort of goods are involved. None of those are things that are really important. I won't be testing you on them. It's just good to get some feel for what international trade means in the global economy. So we'll spend a little bit of time on that, not so much time. And then we'll start at a very introductory level to talk about our first basic model of international trade. We won't get very far into that in the time that we have today. Then we'll continue on with that on Wednesday. All right, so before doing any of that, does any of you have questions about the basic syllabus, just the kind of mechanics of the course, the requirements, that kind of thing? Yeah. That's what I'm doing now. Yeah. So when I plug myself into this microphone, then I'm podcasting the lectures. Yes. Other questions? Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's a good question. What are the dates in the midterm? Well, I can't tell you the exact dates of the midterms right now because I'm never quite sure, since I revise the course every year, about how long everything is going to take. But I certainly have target dates in mind. So a typical target for me for the first midterm, what are we on, April 2 now? So April 9, April 16, April 23, so 16th would be beginning of the third week, 23 would be beginning of the fourth week, right? So I would guess somewhere there in the week of the 23rd would be the first midterm. That's my target. Yeah, good question. Any other questions on the administrative flow of the course? All right, so let's talk about a few numbers. Oops. Okay. Before we get to those numbers that are up on the screen now, we'll just ask ourselves about which country is the world's largest exporter of goods in 2009, which is the most recent year for which I got the data. Okay, this is an easy one. What would you guess? World's largest exporter of goods? China. Okay, so China's the world's largest exporter of goods. Now, interestingly, China only overtook the previous leader just that year, in 2009. So China in 2009... China was an exporter